In this video, we're going to talk through how you summarize your monthly profit and loss statement to be uploaded, that you will then upload into Deepdive. And we have an example P&L here that is kind of pretty straightforward on a monthly basis, what you would be finding with various line items. And we'll kind of discuss how do you summarize this into the key line items that we will upload into Deepdive. And to start out, you just want to, below this profit and loss statement, create these key line items, which for Deepdive are, you want the date, so we know what data point each line item belongs to, or which month each line item belongs to, then the revenue, cost of goods sold, the sales marketing spend, R&D spend, G&A, and then ultimately the EBITDA of a business. And I will go through line by line, kind of how you best summarize these individual pieces. But to start things out, you want to get the date right. So, this data set here runs from October all the way through March 2020. So you can basically just pull this down as you please and pull this over. And this, in a sense, gives you like the header of what you're now looking to fill out. The revenue, when we think about revenue, we only want to run the kind of, what is the scalable revenue, or the revenue that is generated through the scalable business model of a business. So when I look at this P&L, I see that we have software revenue and like other revenue, which might be from once-off license fees or kind of service fees that doesn't necessarily scale with the business over time. And consequently, we're going to ignore that and only want to run this software revenue here. And what is also important to note for this line item is that you only want to run the revenue that you ultimately upload the transaction file with as well. So ultimately you want to run the revenue in the P&L that the transactional level item links to as well. Secondary, we have the cost of goods sold, which really from an ethos perspective is what are all the variable costs that go into servicing this revenue? As you sell an additional dollar of revenue, what are the variable costs that go into servicing that? And when we talk about software businesses, this is usually the kind of hosting cost of the software, as well as the customer success salaries, given that usually the more customers, the more software revenue you generate, the more customer success folks you usually need as well. So we'll be adding both of these pieces together as the variable cost, or the cost of goods sold for the software revenue. And then the sales marketing spend line item is really around the total customer acquisition cost that go into acquiring new customers, which we as a venture capital firm like to look at on a fully loaded basis. We would advise you to do the same, but it's really, this line item should include what are all the sales marketing expenditure that go into acquiring new customers, which if I look at this P&L, we have marketing expenses, we have sales commissions, and then we also want to look at the kind of sales and marketing salaries. So I'm going to include those here as well. So it's important that you break those out on a monthly basis and pull that over here. Then the R&D spend is really what goes into building product, which in this case is really mainly the research and development salaries. So I'm going to include those. If there's other kind of software expenses that go into building product, anything the like, you can include those here as well. Pull that over here. And then lastly, the G&A is really like what are all the below the line item expenses that you basically haven't included beforehand. So in this case, it's the general administrative, the rent of the business, office supplies, as well as other expenses. And that's really all the below the line item costs. And then lastly, as the EBITDA, you want to use kind of this net income or EBITDA line item here to end off with. And this is kind of how you summarize this P&L. Then as a last step, you want to bring this over into a separate tab. So I simply now just kind of pull this over into a separate tab here within Excel. Pull this, down all the way over here. One thing you want to make sure of is that you don't have any empty cells here, because Deepdive sometimes, so you will just want to delete all the data in here, or these columns, to make sure there's no empty cells here to the right. And then lastly, change the date format to something that Deepdive can use. There's a plethora of date formats, but the default here is $Y-MM-date A. And with this, you're good to go. You can save this as a Excel file or as a CSV. Both would work to be uploaded to Deepdive.